starting about Sunday afternoon, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And it's actually much better this evening, but I'm just getting started. So if things get rough before we get through this class, I hope you'll forgive me in advance and bear with me. We're going to try to finish our study of the book of Genesis tonight. And so we'll begin reading in chapter 48. And one other note, I have with me this evening my English Standard Version. And I noticed something in the reading from chapter 49 that disturbed me a little bit. And the first time I've really had my antenna go up over the English Standard Version. And we'll cover that when I get to it in a moment. But anyway, this has been, I think, a very fun and rewarding study. We're basically just doing it as a simple Bible study, reading the text together and discussing what the text says and what we're learning from it. The challenge, of course, is it's such a long book, and there's so many interesting narratives in this, of course, first book of Moses, that we could spend years studying if we wanted to go in depth. Of course, that's not the purpose of our class. So we're having to speed up, go a little faster in some places, and slow down in others. But I hope and pray that this has been a good study for you. I will tell you that, and my mother doesn't want to hear this, but if we finish tonight, next week, we're either going to do one of two things. We're going to sing next Wednesday night, or, and we haven't spoken with the one in charge, or we're going to begin a video series. Is Genesis history. It'll probably be a two-part study, kind of as a wrap-up to what we're doing in our study here. And then some of you have seen it already in theaters. It's really just a documentary. It's kind of misleading to call it a movie. It's more of a documentary. It's a Christian evidences excursion into looking at generally worldviews, but touches on a lot of the events in the book of Genesis and sheds light on it from a creationist perspective. And it's very rewarding. It's very informative and educational. And so the elders have said that we want to show this, and it may take at least 2, maybe 3 weeks to show its entirety. So I wanted to let you know that in advance. And then when we're finished with the video series, my father will begin a study on Wednesday nights in the book of Deuteronomy. And so we're looking forward to that as well. Okay, chapter 48. Any questions or comments before we get going? What's that? I knew you had a comment, but I just couldn't hear you. But
I said Deuteronomy's running out my ears.
Deuteronomy's running out your ears?
We had the class, brother.
Oh, you had the class. Well, good. All right. Well, y'all will have to behave then when my father teaches the class, and be quiet so he can teach the class. So, you know in advance. Chapter 48, verse 1. After this, Joseph was told, "Behold, your father is ill." So he took with him his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And it was told Jacob, "Your son Joseph has come to you." Then Israel summoned his strength and sat up in bed. And Jacob said to Joseph, "God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me, and said to me, Behold, I will make you fruitful and multiply you, and I will make of you a company of peoples, and will give this land to your offspring after you for an everlasting possession. And now your 2 sons who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you in Egypt are mine. Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine, as Reuben and Simeon are. And the children that you fathered after them shall be yours. They shall be called by the name of their brothers in their inheritance. As for me, when I came from Paddan, to my sorrow, Rachel died in the land of Canaan on the way, when there was still some distance to go to Ephrath, and I buried her there on the way to Ephrath, that is, Bethlehem. When Israel saw Joseph's sons, he said, Who are these? Joseph said to his father, They are my sons, whom God has given me here. And he said, Bring them to me, please, that I may bless them. Now the eyes of Israel were dim with age, so that he could not see. So Joseph brought them near him, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Israel said to Joseph, I never expected to see your face, and behold, God has let me see your offspring also. Then Joseph removed them from his knees, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and brought them near him. And Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on the head of Ephraim, who was the younger, and his left hand on the head of Manasseh, crossing his hands, for Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph and said, the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life long to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the boys. And in them let my name be carried on, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac. Let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. When Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, it displeased him, and he took his father's hand to move it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, not this way, my father, since this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head. But his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. Nevertheless, his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his offspring shall become a multitude of nations. So he blessed him that day, saying, by you Israel will pronounce blessings, saying, God make you as Ephraim and as Manasseh. Then he put Ephraim before Manasseh. Then Israel said to Joseph, behold, I am about to die, but God will be with you and will bring you again to the land of your fathers. Moreover, I have given to you rather than to your brothers one mountain slope that I took from the hand of the Amorites with my sword and with my bow. So we learned a lot of interesting things here. That last reference to the sword and bow, we were not told anything about that before just now. So there's an incident in the life of Israel that we were just not told, except for this passing reference. But it was a piece of land that he would be getting in addition to the inheritance he would receive, or his son would receive, when the land was settled. So this is the actual adoption of Manasseh and Ephraim, or Ephraim and Manasseh, depending on the order in which you put the name. Manasseh was which of the two? He was the oldest, the firstborn. And so his father chose to cross his hands as he blessed him, and put the right hand on the head of the younger, on Ephraim, and his left hand on the head of Manasseh, the older. And this displeased Joseph. We'll say more about that in a moment. There's an idiomatic expression here in verse 12 where Joseph removed them from his knees. And we would read that, and we would say from that, these were little boys sitting on their father's lap, and he picked them up and handed them to the grandfather. I don't believe that's true. These are probably 20 to 22-year-old men. They're grown men. And this expression from between his knees simply meant they were in proximity to him, standing probably in front of him. And so I don't think we should misunderstand the exact meaning here. Now, although some have argued that perhaps this was chronologically out of order, and this was early on in Israel's sojourn in Egypt, and perhaps they were little boys, but in light of chapter 49, I don't believe that's the case. And besides, the chapter begins with his father's ill. He's on his deathbed. He's been in Egypt for 17 years. These boys had already been born. They were not little boys, at least 20, perhaps 22 years old. So the between the knees is an expression which means something in Hebrew. I would only assume perhaps it means some idiomatic expression meaning standing there in front of him, or maybe it has some further meaning that I'm not aware of. But nevertheless, the point of this was that Joseph was adopting these two boys. And this is important, because Joseph now becomes two. He's not just one, he's two. And so it's like a cell that divides, and so Joseph is now two instead of one. You have the 12 sons of Israel. But two of those sons, and we're going to see this in chapter 49, in essence are going to have no inheritance in the land later. 400 years from this time, they will not have any inheritance in the land. That would be Levi and Simeon. Now, Simeon did have an inheritance, but it really was so minuscule, it was just absorbed into Judah and became part of Judah, so that in time, it really wasn't recognized as a separate region belonging to Simeon. He had a few towns and cities and villages allotted to him when the land was given out in the days of Joshua. But they didn't have their own territory as such. And we'll see that, and we'll say more about that perhaps when we get to chapter 49. But those two were taken out of the way. But there was an allotment for Simeon. It was just minuscule. And in time, as I said, it would eventually just be absorbed into Judah. But now with Levi, there was no inheritance. They were to be scattered among the tribes. And there was reason for that. And the reason that Israel states in the next chapter is different than the reason God gives when they settled the land. When they settled the land, the Levites were what group of people? They were the priests. And so there was good reason then for the priests to be scattered through all the tribes and through all the region, because they were the primary teachers. We might say preachers and our teachers. And so they were the ones who were there to help maintain order as far as the law of Moses was concerned. So it was good to have them dispersed among the tribes. So in that sense, we only had 11 sons, if you take Levi out of the equation. And so Joseph then would become 2 in the sense that Manasseh and Ephraim would then take an inheritance. And so the number is back up to 12. So you understand what I'm saying, right? You follow the math. Yes, Roger?
Simeon, was he not the one who caused problems for the tribes because of his infidelity?
Infidelity? No. We're talking about Judah?
No, Simeon.
Yeah, now Simeon, I'm not aware of it. Perhaps you'll have to bring me up to speed on that. Simeon, we'll talk more about him in chapter 49, but Simeon was one who was involved in the slaughter after his sister was raped. But we'll say more about that in the next chapter. Now, there's something that I want to say that's not really, it's just topical in nature. It's kind of preachery, and so I hope you'll bear with me tonight. But I couldn't resist, because when I saw Joseph's reaction in this chapter, I thought, man, there's a sermon right there. And it really is a good sermon, because Joseph was displeased with this choice. And when we think about this choice, it's really a choice of election, as that term is understood generally and more specifically in the Bible. This was an idea involving election, a choosing of one over the other. And Joseph was displeased because he was assuming the older should receive this. Now, Jacob was what with the twins in relation to his twin brother? He was the younger, wasn't he? And his name was changed to Israel. So he understood what it was like for the younger to have preeminence over the older. And he's carrying that over here. But this was not arbitrary. He was using the gift of prophecy, no doubt, in chapter 49. Clearly, he was using the gift of prophecy that was allotted to him. Perhaps these things have been revealed to him by God. We don't know all how he would understand these things. But certainly, Joseph was displeased with this selection. Are any of you familiar with the Apostle Paul and his trouble in his ministry? Yes, everyone should say, of course we are, Brother Gray. We've read the New Testament. We know about his trouble. What was his trouble involving? What primarily was the source of Paul's thorn in his side? Judaizing teachers. Okay, so Paul, being the Gentile that he was persecuted by... Okay, so you are awake. So the Hebrew of Hebrews was persecuted by fellow Hebrews. Now, why were the Judaizers so upset with Paul?
Because he was teaching something against what they believed.
What did they believe?
That they had to be circumcised.
Okay, but what else did they believe that was really at the heart of their complaint? We're God's chosen people. We're the elect. What are you doing hobnobbing with these Gentiles? You know, if you read Romans 10 and 11, he really goes into a great lengthy discussion about that, where Paul says, he's very masterful at how he goes to the Old Testament prophets and he pulls out passages from different prophets, and he's referring to, of course, the ministry he had with the Gentiles. And he was saying that I'm ministering to these Gentiles in order to provoke my fellow Jews to jealousy. And I want them to be jealous. Why? Why did he want them to be jealous? He's trying to provoke them to do what? To convert, to embrace the gospel. That was Paul's aim. That was his heart's desire and prayer for Israel, is that they might be saved. And so if ministering to the Gentiles meant making them jealous with the people that were not a people before, but are now the people of God. And so Paul really was spending much of his time having to deal with these unbelieving Jews who were angry, as Joseph is angry here, at God's selection. This was God's choice, that the Gentiles be chosen. For example, in Ephesians 3, we're all familiar with this because I cite it often in my preaching. But listen carefully to what Paul says about this mystery. He says, for this reason I, Paul, the prisoner of Christ Jesus, for you Gentiles, if indeed you have heard of the dispensation of the grace of God, which was given to me for you, how that by revelation he made known to me the mystery, as I've briefly written already, by which when you read, you may understand my knowledge in the mystery of Christ, which in other ages was not made known to the sons of men, as it has now been revealed by the Spirit to his holy apostles and prophets. What was that mystery? Well, he answers that the Gentiles should be fellow heirs of the same body and partakers of his promise in Christ through the gospel. Ephesians 3, 1-7. This was God's choice. And so in Ephesians 1, for example, verse 8, having made known to us the mystery of his will, according to his good pleasure, which he purposed in himself, that in the dispensation of the fullness of the times he might gather together in one all things in Christ, both which are in heaven and which are on earth, in him. In him also we have obtained an inheritance, being predestined according to the purpose of him who works all things according to the counsel of his will. And he goes on to speak of the election in this same chapter. And so Paul is enumerating and driving home the thought of this mystery, as he refers to it, that knowledge that was in God's mind in previous generations, but has now been revealed by the holy apostles and prophets. Namely, God chose the Gentiles to be on equal footing with the Jews. That was a very difficult pill for the Jews, fleshly Israel, to swallow in the days of Paul. It still is for a lot of devout Jews. They just can't conceive of subhumans being part of, and that's how they would view non-Jews, uncircumcised people in particular, as subhuman, being part of the family of God and certainly partakers of God's blessing. You know, when you think about it, this is not the only way in which people are displeased with God's choice. I've shared this with you before, but this is a true story. I worked with Georgia Power, and I really did not like working there. It was the most boring job I've ever had in my entire life. It was the kind of job where you showed up in the morning and the supervisor would literally say, hide until lunchtime. We have nothing to do. And so for 4.5 hours, we were playing rook or hiding or doing something. And I was spending most of my time trying to convert my fellow workers or clock watchers. And so you pay an exorbitant electric bill every month to pay people to stand around and watch dust settle on handrails. We have to dust off occasionally. But anyway, it was a boring job. I hated it. Yes.
Evidently you weren't a lineman.
No, I was not at that point. There are other jobs where you do work, but you don't work on the bottom rung. You just stand around waiting to do something.
You were not someone who went out.
No, sir.
And,
I did not.
Leaders.
I did not do that. No, sir. I worked in the plant. I worked under the coal truss where the train dumped the coal in the train truss. Anyway, I was having a conversation with a gentleman one day, and he was a devout member of a denominational church, a deacon in his church. And after I had mentioned several passages of Scripture on the necessity of baptism, he began cursing and swearing, and I began calling him Peter. At that point, he took a shovel and proceeded to try to kill me with it. He literally tried to kill. If he had not been restrained, and I was not being a smart aleck. I was not being captious or smart alecky. I was being very sincere and straightforward. I did call him Peter because he was cursing and swearing, and I started hearing the rooster crowing. And that's when he began to try to kill me. And I've known a number of people like this, who you simply quote a Bible verse, Acts 2:38, Mark 16:16. And they'll go back and I'll say, yeah, Romans 10:19. Yeah, but Mark 16:16 is still in my Bible. Yeah, but the Bible said John 3:16. Yeah, but Acts 2:38 is still in my Bible. And you just keep going and keep going, and eventually they realize you're not going to stop. And so they start rioting in the streets, and they put up banners, and it's just amazing how people are when you won't back down. The plan of salvation is just one of many ways in which many human beings protest God's selection. Why did God choose baptism as the means for entering into Christ? Someone answer that question for me. You don't know? I don't know either. Did he? Are you sure? It's absolutely essential, isn't it? And I don't have to understand why I do it. Did Naaman have to know why God told him to dip 7 times in the Jordan? No, he didn't. And so if I can't explain to someone, why did God require me to be dunked in water, buried, immersed in water, in order to have my sins forgiven? I'm not obligated to answer that question. All I can do is tell you this is what God said. Why did God tell Israel to march around the walls of Jericho? I don't know. But they had to do it, or the walls wouldn't have fallen down.
But if you think about it, going down the old man and covered
Yeah.
the water coming up the new man is...
The picture is there, isn't it?
Yeah, the picture's there, it's a no-brainer.
You have a dead man in sin, buried in the grave, and then you resurrect a new man. You're right. Romans 6:3-4. So, indeed, that's makes people mad too. Why don't we use pianos in church? We have no authority for them, do we? People get upset when we have discussions about pure worship before God. It bothers them. And they don't want to hear God is spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. They don't want to talk about that. We talk about how many churches God has. He has one church. They don't want to hear that because, well, we all have our own church. We want to do things our own way and believe our own truth, quote unquote. And so we don't want anyone telling us that we can't worship where we want and how we want, with who we want, etc., etc. We don't like God's moral code. We want to live a homosexual lifestyle. We want to live in open live-in relationships in our home without the benefit of marriage, and so on and so forth. We don't want God telling us how to live our lives. Joseph is not the only one to be angry with God's selection, with God's choice. The question I have to ask, am I responding favorably to God's will when God says, I've chosen this one over that one? Do we protest? Or do we simply say, Lord, it is as you would have it to be? Because, Lord, you are in charge. Any of the questions or comments about chapter 48? Good. Chapter 49. I will say this about verse 15 and 16. And we've mentioned this before in our study of Genesis. He said to his son Joseph as he's blessing him that God had been his shepherd his whole life. God had taken care of him. But he also said the angel has redeemed me from all evil. What angel is that? Is this the angel of the Lord that sometimes appears as a pre-incarnate form of the Son of God, which I believe occurs in the Old Testament? Or is this just an angel of the Lord dispatched to protect him from all evil? It is interesting because angels play a prominent role in all the Bible, but particularly in Genesis. And that's one of the things I believe that has emerged, at least for me, as I have gone through this study. I've often said angels are everywhere in the Bible, and we don't really talk a lot about angels. We avoid this subject at all costs, kind of like the book of Revelation. But angels are everywhere. And particularly in the book of Genesis, they are everywhere. They permeate almost every narrative. And he mentions that here, and I find that interesting. Yes?
Wasn't Joseph the one that wrestled the angel?
What's that?
It was Jacob.
He's the one that wrestled the angel, yes. And the angel's the one who changed his name. Now, I believe in that instance, the angel, according to the prophet, later would say, that was none other than God. He was wrestling with God. And the angel said, you wrestle with God and with man and prevail. So,
Doesn't the angel there, Jacob pact something similar to this reference here? The angel has said.
well, he changed his name to Israel. He changed name from Jacob to Israel on that occasion. Are you waving at me back there? Are you? Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, Rod. Go ahead.
It seems that the angel of the Lord is primary in the book of Genesis. I believe that's the word.
Judges?
Genesis.
Genesis, yes. Well, he's in Judges too.
Yeah.
And Joshua. He's everywhere in the Old Testament, actually. The angel of the Lord differentiated from simply an angel that visited or angel that assisted. My question would be, verse 16, is this the angel that wrestled with him, or is this just an angel that God dispatched to oversee his life? Which raises the question, always comes up whenever you talk about angel. Do I have a guardian angel? I saw something on Facebook the other day. Somebody had a picture of an angel, just looking all depressed. This is what my guardian angel must look like. Having to keep up with me. Anyway, kind of cute. Chapter 49. Jacob called his sons and said, by the way, this is fascinating because we're going to see here the prophetic gift in action. And he's going to be pronouncing not just a blessing on his sons, but he's also going to be stating their future outcome. This is where you're headed. This is the kind of person and our people that will come from you, and this is going to be your lot, in other words. And so he's announcing as he's blessing the case of them. Yes, Scott?
The guardian angel. It would be interesting if it is the angel, the pre-incarnate form of God, that we would also have this same guardian angel as Jacob did that has also delivered us from evil, being Jesus.
Well, we do have this angel that delivers us from evil. Angel in the sense of,
If that's the same individual, if that wasn't pre-incarnate Jesus, then we actually do have this.
But we don't want the Jehovah's Witnesses to confuse what we're saying here. We're not going in that direction at all. I broke a lady's hip over that one time, by the way, so we don't want to go there. Okay, chapter 49. I really did. Well, she broke her hip. I had to carry her to the hospital. Well, I was yelling at her. Chapter 49. I wasn't being disrespectful. I was just yelling at what she was saying in a respectful way. I need to shut up. Chapter 49. Jacob called his sons and said, "Gather yourselves together that I may tell you what shall happen to you in days to come. Assemble and listen, O sons of Jacob. Listen to Israel your father. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, and the firstfruits of my strength. Preeminent in dignity and preeminent in power. Unstable as water. You shall not have preeminence, because you went up to your father's bed, you defiled it. He went up to my couch." What's he talking about?
Going in his concubine.
His own concubine. Isn't that amazing, though? He starts off with this great compliment, this preeminent one, but you're unstable as water. I mean, you have all these great qualities, but oh my, you're unstable. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Weapons of violence are their swords. Let my soul come not into their counsel. O my glory, be not joined to their company. For in their anger they killed men, and in their willfulness they hamstrung oxen. I'm not sure what that's a reference to. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Notice again, I'll divide them in Jacob, scatter them in Israel. Simeon did receive an allotment in the inheritance, but it was just a small amount. And eventually, in time, he would not be recognized as a separate tribe any longer. Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's son shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's cub. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He stooped down, he crouched as a lion, and as a lioness who dares rouse him. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until Shiloh come. Now, that's not what the English Standard Version says. Who else has the English Standard Version tonight? Until tribute comes to him. I believe that's a very unfortunate rendering here. There is a footnote, and the footnote says Hebrew has Shiloh, until Shiloh comes. Well, why not just translate it that way? I don't understand what's happened here. Very disappointed in this particular translation, in this verse. Until Shiloh come. We'll say more about that in a moment. Binding his foal to the vine and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. He has washed his garments in wine and his vesture in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine and his teeth whiter than milk. Zebulun shall dwell at the shore of the sea. He shall become a haven for ships, and his border shall be at Sidon. Issachar is a strong donkey. Crouching. He's talking about his own children, anyway. Issachar is a strong donkey, crouching between the sheepfolds. He saw that a resting place was good and that the land was pleasant. So he bowed his shoulder to bear and became a servant at forced labor. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent in the way, a viper by the path that bites the horse's heels so that his riders fall backwards. Don't go near him, in other words. I'll wait for your salvation, O Lord. Riders shall raid Gad, but he shall raid at their heels. Asher's food shall be rich, and he shall yield royal delicacies. Naphtali is a doe let loose that bears beautiful fawns. Joseph is a beautiful bow, a fruitful bow by a spring. His branches run over the wall. The archers bitterly attacked him, shot at him, and harassed him severely. Yet his bow remained unmoved. His arm were made agile by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob. From there is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. By the hand of your father he will help you, by the Almighty who will bless you with blessings of heaven above, blessing of the deep that crouches beneath, blessing of the breast and of the womb. The blessings of your father are mighty beyond the blessings of my parents, up to the bounties of everlasting hills. May they be on the head of Joseph and on the brow of him who was set apart, who was set apart from his brothers. That's quite a lengthy blessing and quite colorful for Joseph, isn't it? Benjamin is a ravenous wolf, in the morning devouring the prey, and in the evening dividing the spoil. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel. This is what their father said to them as he blessed them, blessing each with the blessing suitable to him. Then he commanded them and said to them, I am to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, to the east of Mamre, in the land of Canaan, which Abraham brought from Ephron the Hittite, to possess as a burying place. There they buried Abraham and Sarah his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah his wife. And there I buried Leah. The field and the cave that is in it were bought from the Hittites. When Jacob finished commanding his sons, he drew up his feet into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. Our time is really running away from us, so we're going to have to hurry through this. I did mention verse 10, disappointed in the English Standard rendering here, until Shiloh come. Clearly, a messianic reference. Isaiah uses the term Shiloh, the pool of Siloam. These are all variations on the same word. Jesus used the pool of Siloam to heal a man that was born blind, as you recall. It was from the pool of Siloam that the priests, during their annual feast, would take a horn and dip it in water in it, and then would pour it out as a drink offering at a set time. And the Jews all understood this to be a drink offering poured out in hopes for the coming of their Messiah, the Christ. And so these waters of Shiloah that Isaiah referred to was a reference to his governance, his governing the people of Israel. You've chosen these troubled waters over the calm waters of Shiloah, which reference to himself, how he would make their way peaceful and calm and easy and be blessed, whereas you've chosen the very troubled path in rejecting God. Again, this is a reference to an individual, and that individual that came from the tribe of Judah was Christ, the Son of the living God, who came from the tribe of Judah. This is a powerful messianic text, and one that, again, I'm very disappointed that the translators here missed. Yes, Roger?
If I'm not mistaken, Shiloh is a place where the tabernacle
Originally was placed, yes.
In the first place.
It stayed there quite a while,
Right.
and then it was taken away. Chapter 50 of Genesis. Joseph fell on his father's face. Before we get here, there's an expression that's been used more than once in Genesis, used in verse 33. And Israel said it himself, to be gathered to his people. And most commentators say that's just an expression meaning I'm going to die. Well, it certainly is an expression meaning I'm going to die. But when he was dead, the text says he was what? He was gathered to his people. What does that mean?
Where they were.
People ask all the time It comes up all the time. When I die and I go to heaven or wherever, the other place, will I know anyone?
Yes.
You will? How can you be so sure?
Well, that's what happened with Lazarus.
Lazarus didn't say anything, but the rich man certainly did. The rich man somehow knew who Abraham was. And he saw Lazarus over there in Abraham's bosom and said, hey, send him over here. Dip his finger in water to cool my tongue.
He gave out his 5 brethren.
He had remembered them back home, but did he recognize someone? Indeed he did. He looked across that chasm and he recognized Lazarus was over there, a place where he wasn't. So he saw Lazarus over there. So when your parents, grandparents, wife, husband, children have gone before you and they're in paradise, are they waiting for you? So when you leave this place and you go to be with the Lord, do you suppose you will be reunited with them? And if you say no, or you say I don't know, you're saying you believe something different than Jacob believed when he died. Because Jacob believed fully that he would be reunited with his people. And the text says when he died, he was gathered to his people. Who were his people? Well, he just mentioned 2 of them, Abraham and Isaac. You suppose he saw them? You reckon he recognized them? Indeed, I believe he did. Chapter 50. So Joseph fell on his father's face, wept over him, kissed him, and Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father. So the physicians embalmed Israel. 40 days were required for it. Oh my. You can be embalmed now in just a matter of a few hours. What do you suppose this was all about? Why would it take more than a month?
Well, he used spices.
They salted him a lot, didn't they? And they took out all their internal organs. And they wrapped them in linen. He was mummified. And so he was made into a mummy. 40 days were required for it. That is how many days were required for embalming. And the Egyptians wept for him 70 days. When the days of weeping for him were past, Joseph spoke to the household of Pharaoh, saying, if now I have found favor in your eyes, please speak in the ears of Pharaoh, saying, my father made me swear, saying, I'm about to die. In my tomb that I hewed up for myself in the land of Canaan, there shall you bury me. Now therefore let me please go up and bury my father, then I will return. And Pharaoh answered, go up and bury your father as he made you swear. So Joseph went up to bury his father. With him went up all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his household, all the elders of the land of Egypt, as well as all the household of Joseph, his brothers, and his father's household. Only their children, their flocks, and their herd were left in the land of Goshen. And there went up with him both chariots and horsemen. It was a very great company. When they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond the Jordan, this is interesting because they went all the way around and came back from the east side of the Jordan to enter in as they would later come in. There may be reason for this, strategic reason, because this was a large company of people with horses and chariots coming out of Egypt. And they're probably not taking the normal route because it might have appeared as though there's some type of invasion taking place. This was a vast group of people. So they lamented with him a very great grievous lamentation, and he made mourning for his father 7 days. When the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning on the threshing floor of Atad, they said, this is a grievous mourning by the Egyptians. Therefore the place was named Abel Mizraim. It is beyond the Jordan. Thus his sons did for him as he had commanded them. For his sons carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah to the east of Mamre, which Abraham bought with the field from Ephron the Hittite to possess as a burying place. After he had buried his father, Joseph returned to Egypt with his brothers and all who had gone up with him to bury his father. Josephus tells us that verse 15 is out of order chronologically, that what we're about to read occurred before that we just read. When, hurry. Yes.
As far as we know, is Jacob the first person other than an Egyptian that was mummified?
I have no idea. It's the first one I read about. I don't know. I don't know if there's any others. Yes, ma'am. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, it may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil that we did to him. So they sent a message to Joseph saying, your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin because they did evil to you. And now please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father. Joseph wept when they spoke to him. His brothers also came and fell down before him and said, behold, we are your servants. But Joseph said to them, do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear. I will provide for you and your little ones. Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. So Joseph remained in Egypt, he and his father's house. Joseph lived 110 years. And Joseph saw Ephraim's children of the third generation. The children also of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were counted as Joseph's own. And Joseph said to his brothers, I'm about to die, but God will visit you, bring you up out of this land to the land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, God will surely visit you. You shall carry up my bone from here. So Joseph died, being 110 years old. They embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt.
Well, that
So,
pretty well shows that he was, mummified.
yes. So, chapter 50, verse 15. His brothers are still disturbed. It's been a considerable period of time, been 22 years roughly, 20 years plus another 17. It's been nearly 40 years since they did to Joseph what they did to Joseph. That's a lifetime. It's a generation. And they're still agonizing over it. Their conscience is still bothering them. And they'd already gone to their father and asked their father to say something, and their father had. But clearly it wasn't necessary for their father to have said anything. Joseph was clearly more than willing to forgive them. And indeed, it reminds us of all that's said. There's so much in the New Testament about forgiveness and the need for forgiveness. And if we're not willing to forgive each other the wrongs we've committed against one another, then God certainly will not forgive us. Joseph certainly understood this. And so forgiveness is certainly something that is a part of every Christian's life. It was a part of Joseph's life as well, obviously. But he said to his brothers, am I in the place of God? What do you mean by that? What is he talking about? What were they worried about? Romans 12, verse 17. Repay no one evil for evil. Have regard for good things in the sight of all men. If it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. Beloved, do not avenge yourself, but rather give place to wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. Therefore, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him a drink. For in so doing, you will heap coals of fire. You know, I don't believe Joseph intended to heap coals of fire on his brother's head, but they were burning. They were burning. And they were burning because Joseph had not repaid them evil for evil, among other things. Their own conscience, of course. But the fact was, he was very good to them and treated them graciously. And so, again, someone said not long ago, I would much rather let God have vengeance because he's much better able to mete it out and deal with it than am I. Can you think of any other thing that God is in charge of that we sometimes want to take precedent over? I remember, was it just a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, the Supreme Court of the United States handed down a decree, which the Supreme Court should never do anyway, that all 50 states should recognize same-sex marriages. Who authored marriage? Who's in charge of marriage? So when the Supreme Court says, we're going to redefine what marriage is and order you to accept what marriage is, what was the Supreme Court saying? We are in the place of, we're going to supplant God. You know, you could multiply that thousands of times over. It's not just the Supreme Court, but preachers do it all the time. Eldership sometimes do it. Individuals do it every day, almost daily basis. We put ourselves in the place of God and decide, my will is better than God's will. My way is better than God's way. And so we try to do better what we think God has gotten wrong. Yes, ma'am?
You know, that filters down to simple things that we do. Like today, I was cutting pictures out of a magazine to use in class sometimes. And I had to be real careful which pictures I cut out to make sure that I wasn't cutting out women and women and men and men and things like that. Filtered down to that simple thing.
You know what bothers me, friend? Really bothers me? Out does not have 3 syllables. But I will say this, and that's not what bothers me. But what does bother me is I have, out of my goodness and goodwill and charitable heart, spent many days watching Chopped with my wife to please her. And I was watching Chopped last night with my wife to please her. And this German-sounding man said, "My husband."
Uh-oh.
And they showed a picture of him and his husband kissing. We're not watching Chopped anymore. That's disgusting. It's just disgusting. Yes?
Amazing how they reject God so much, but yet they want institution God institutes.
Yeah, we want to take God's institution and make it after our own liking.
Yet they reject God.
Yeah. What's the point? Why do you want marriage if you're not going to do what God says anyway? Why do you want that? That's a good question.
Why do you want a preacher
I don't know.
married?
Doesn't make any sense. Am I in the place of God? That was a very powerful, stirring occasion in the life of Joseph. I actually like Chopped. I didn't watch it just because she liked watching it, but
What are you saying, chopped?
Chopped.
The food
Chopped. Chopped.
like you were saying.
The stupid program where a bunch of snotty people tell you, "I don't like what you could," and they kick you off the show. Anyway.
But a lot of those HGTV and programs like that have that on. I quit watching one of the home improvement things because they did a lot of that.
Yeah.
They had a lot of that gays married on.
You mean gay TV?
It might as well be.
Horrible gay TV? HGTV? Yeah, I don't know what it stands for. What does HGTV stand for? I don't know. Oh, Home and Garden. Oh. Every time I turn over, there's a homosexual being shown a house or something. I don't mean to be ugly about homosexuals. I guess what I'm saying is, you will all understand what's happening here. We're being forced on a daily basis everywhere you turn. You can't even watch a stupid cooking show without having someone trying to force this issue on in your heart and your mind. And I'm just not going to sit back and take it anymore. I'm not trying to be ugly, not trying to be unkind. I'm just being normal. And I'm saying, I believe God's way is the best way. I'm not ashamed of that. And I would be ashamed of anyone who is ashamed of that. And I'm ashamed of anyone who wants to say otherwise. I think we should stand up and say what we believe is right and not be ugly, not be unkind. But certainly I'm not going to lay around and let people walk all over what God has done in creating the human race. Yes? Robert? Oh, yeah. I don't start me on that. The bell did ring, right? I mean, my grandkids are likely to just come out of class anyway. Yeah. Oh, Mama got it. 843 in songbooks, please. Right? 843. Today, my wife is the same age as her grandson. If you just add a number. It's her birthday. Joe's going to sing happy birthday for her when we dismiss. Who else having a birthday today? I know Aaron Stiles having a birthday today.
And you're going to get in more trouble.
It's my comfort zone. I'm familiar to this area. Okay, let me go over some names of those on the prayer list. Robert Davison is not doing well again, and they're asking to remember him in our prayers. Also, Jane Davison's sister is in the hospital in Rome with pneumonia and not doing well. They've asked to remember her in our prayers. Also, James and Ann Smith both need our prayers. But Ann fell recently and is back in the hospital at Wellstar in Douglasville. I want to remember her in a special way. Bobby Sparks, a lady from the 101 congregation, is in the hospital in Rome and requesting our prayers. Sister Doris Sanders has a friend. The friend name is Sebastian, is that correct? Who was in a car accident, and she'd ask to remember him in our prayers. Also, her brother-in-law, Chester Jordan, suffered a heart attack today. And his daughter has been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. So her sister has a whole lot on her plate, and certainly Sister Sanders does as well. We want to remember this good family in our prayers as they're suffering very much at the present time. Fran said we found this in the library. It is a library card which we don't print, we have to pay for, and apparently some of our young people are going in the library and making what appears to be paper airplanes. There's a better way to do this, by the way, but please don't use the library cards for paper airplanes. And if you're not going to get books and read them, then stay out of the library. Yes, ma'am? What about him? You don't know if they're going to keep her in the hospital or not? I see. So she's going for MRI. Okay. Well, we'll check and find out. But thank you for telling us that, brother. This Saturday is our Bible Bowl. We need all of us here. First thing, Saturday morning, 9 o'clock. Well, that's late for me, but please be here by 9 o'clock Saturday morning. We're going to be having lunch here. Is there a devotional after the Bible Bowl? 44th annual. It's 44th annual Bible Bowl. Oh, I see what it says now. Okay, I had to read that a second time. Yes, I need help moving this podium tonight and some other things to get set up for the Bible Bowl Saturday. Did I say something backwards? I wouldn't be surprised. Don't forget the gospel meeting that continues at Bremen through tomorrow night. They're meeting at 7 o'clock. Don't forget the Georgia School of Preaching Lectureship, which is Saturday week. That's not this Saturday, but the next, May 6th and 7th. We have Brennan and Justin both will be speaking on that occasion. We certainly want to be there to support them. Bremen Youth Day, Saturday, May the 13th. I want to remind you about that. Any other announcements we need to make before we dismiss tonight? 843 in our songbooks is the Song of Invitation. It's been announced. We offer this time at the end of our service as a convenient opportunity for those who have not yet obeyed the gospel or need the prayers of the church. If we can be of assistance to you tonight in any way, please make that need known right now while together we stand as we sing.
Sin of Jesus will receive, sound this word of grace to all, through the heavenly path they lead. All will linger, all will fall, sing it over and over again. Christ receives this thanks of sin.
Dear Lord, thank you for this wonderful day that you've blessed us with. Thank you for this wonderful creation that we all wake up to every morning. Lord, thank you for the incredible church family inside this building and our extended families outside. Lord, thank you for sending your son to die on the cross for all of us. First and foremost, God, thank you for you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.